Before the Flood, The Fall of Atlantis, by Matson. Chapter 15, The Depths Rise. The Golden Palace, once the radiant jewel crowning Atlantis's 10 concentric rings of marble, gold, and unimaginable corruption, had been reduced to a vast flooded crucible of divine judgment and self-destruction. The central temple arena, the spiritual and political heart of the island empire, now resembled a primordial battlefield reclaimed by the sea. Towering columns of polished marble leaned precariously like the broken spines of ancient beasts. Petrified monoliths from Dravok's geomancy stood half-submerged like drowned sentinels. Vast stretches of sand had vitrified into glassy sheets from Leon's blue flames, reflecting the roaring braziers in distorted, nightmarish patterns that multiplied the carnage 1,000-fold. Overflowing channels and burst aqueducts had turned the floor into a churning inland sea of blood-tinged brine that rose steadily, lapping at the lower tiers and carrying the dissolved remnants of the fallen, shards of armor, broken weapons, and the pale, lifeless bodies of those who had been too weak to survive the spectacle. The air was a toxic, scalding miasma that clawed at the throat and lungs with every breath. Thick black smoke from countless fires mingled with scalding steam from boiled waves, sweet rot pharmacia vapors that induced hallucinations and insatiable spiritual hunger, and the heavy copper-sweet reek of spilled blood that never seemed to dry or dissipate. The very stones of the palace groaned and shifted as tremors rippled through the island's foundations, as if Atlantis itself sensed the approach of its doom and trembled in anticipation. 40,000 spectators, their minds long shattered by inhaled elixirs, relentless bloodlust, and the growing cataclysm, had become a single frenzied organism. Their chants rose in a ragged, deafening roar that shook dust from the vaults. High King, let the depths rise and devour the flame. Let flesh fail in its final, glorious agony for the Watchers. Many had collapsed from exhaustion, overdose, or sheer terror, their bodies trampled mercilessly into the rising flood by those still standing. Others writhed on the tiers in ecstatic visions, clawing at their own skin or reaching desperately toward the arena as if they could seize a fragment of the godlike power on display. The outer rings echoed with distant panic, canals overflowing, altars cracking, marble facades splitting as the sea stirred with unnatural fury beyond the fortifications. In hidden chambers scattered throughout the island and far beneath the pyramids in the east, the faithful remnant knelt in ceaseless, defiant prayer, their voices a quiet counterpoint to the chaos. Leon stood at the heart of the maelstrom, a lone figure of blue fire amid the flood. The corruption from Kion's gifts had advanced with terrifying speed. Glowing sapphire scars now covered his forearms, shoulders, chest, and crept up his neck toward his jawline like living veins of molten light. They pulsed visibly with every heartbeat, leaking faint azure radiance that illuminated the churning water around him and cast eerie, shifting shadows on the shattered marble. Each pulse sent lancing waves of searing agony through every nerve and fiber of his being, as though the flames sought to consume the mortal vessel that dared wield them. His sun-bronzed skin felt raw and fever-hot beneath the scorched remnants of his Tanaju bronze plate. His wings of blue fire, tattered from countless clashes yet slowly reforming through sheer altering will, flickered unevenly behind him, one still bearing the deep rents from Thalorion's pincer strike. The olive branch token from the groves of Calliste pressed warm and living against his heart, its gentle radiance the only anchor holding back the tide of darkness. Kion's voice had become a relentless hurricane inside his mind. "You stand on the threshold of true greatness, pup," the Watcher rumbled with dark, possessive affection. "Poseidon is but a relic of a failing bloodline. Thalorion is already broken. Take the power fully. The pain ends the moment you stop resisting. Godhood is not a promise. It is your inheritance. Rule the rings. Command the sea. Become what they already fear you to be. The temptations came with vivid, seductive visions. Leon seated upon the central golden throne, wings of pure blue fire unfurled like banners of dominion over a submissive Atlantis, the Watchers and Nephilim bending the knee in terror and awe, the endless burning torment of corruption transmuted into exquisite pleasure and limitless authority. The glowing scars flared hotter in apparent agreement, flooding his limbs with surges of unnatural strength even as they burned him from within. Leon clenched the olive branch token until the living wood bit deep into his calloused palm, drawing fresh blood that hissed and sizzled where it met the glowing scars. The token's persistent, gentle warmth, alive with the memory of home, the olive groves, and the Creator's clear command, pushed back against the encroaching darkness like a lone star piercing storm clouds. It anchored him to the vivid dream vision granted in the hills of Tanaju, the island sinking beneath the waves, the divine mandate to enter the tournaments, defeat Poseidon, and cast the entire sinful city into the sea. "Not my will," he whispered through gritted teeth, voice raw and barely audible over the roaring crowd and crashing waves. "Yours, creator of all things visible and invisible. Hold me fast as the body fails. Let not Kion's lies or the mockery of false gods break what you have ordained in me." Memories of his fallen team flooded his mind, strengthening his resolve like iron. Stelios's final, tear-streaked roar of unshakable loyalty as he drove the club into his own chest so that Leon might claim the throne of Ring 7 without further staining his hands with brotherly blood. Lysandros's calm, fractured acceptance in his last moments, his pharmacia-addled mind finding miraculous clarity through sheer force of will and obedience. Piran's reckless, fiery laughter turning to screams of agony as his own life force charred him from within during the Battle of the Rings. Boreas's quiet, protective wind shielding the team one final time before the Aeromancer's poisoned breath claimed him. "For them," Leon gasped aloud, "for every faithful soul hidden in these rings and beneath the pyramids in the east, for the vision you burned into my soul in the olive groves." A veiled servant, one of the faithful remnant concealed among the palace slaves and attendants, slipped through the press of chaos and pressed a fresh cloth infused with the last of Lysandros's calming herbs into his hand. Her eyes met his with quiet, burning faith. "The olive groves remember you, my lord king of Ring 7, she murmured beneath the deafening roar. "The prayers of the remnant rise without ceasing from every hidden chamber. The sea stirs with unnatural currents beyond the outermost ring. The foundations already tremble and crack. You are not alone in this darkness. The word endures." Prince Thalorion stood a short distance away, a battered but still formidable colossus of fused crustacean armor glistening perpetually wet with seawater. The favorite son's massive pincer claws flexed and clicked with barely restrained fury, extending slightly into blade-like spears at his mental command. His shrewd, storm-tossed eyes assessed Leon with a complex mixture of cold, political calculation, respect, and genuine wariness. The armor that had once granted him near invincibility now betrayed him more visibly with every passing moment, plates grinding horribly with even minor shifts, new crustacean growths protruding like parasitic tumors from his spine and shoulders, further restricting his once imperial grace into something stiff, labored, and increasingly monstrous. Seawater dripped endlessly from every joint and seam, hissing where it met residual heat from Leon's flames. "You fight with something beyond any Watcher's mere borrowed power, Tanaju dog," Thalorion called across the flooded pit, his voice carrying the wet rumble of crashing waves and the grinding rasp of chitin. A vision from some distant creator, perhaps, some promise of judgment and sinking rings. But the sea claims all things in time. Even the most stubborn dreams of mortal men drown beneath the depths I command. High above, in the opulent crystal luxury boxes that overlook the arena, like thrones of mocking judgment, the 6 Egyptian Nephilim giants leaned forward with predatory intensity and growing unease. Amun-Ra, the Devourer, dominated the center, his deep, burnished golden skin drinking in the torchlight, while jagged crystal growths protruded from his shoulders and spine, arcing with stolen lightning that scorched the air around him. Setek the Stormbreaker toyed restlessly with a massive goblet of blood-laced wine, his malachite scales shimmering with inner green fire. Horus the Far-Seeing's multifaceted eye whirred and clicked continuously, capturing every detail for later recounting in the halls of the Black Land. Isis Tefnut's liquid, hauntingly seductive form rippled with dark delight, droplets hissing as they struck the stone. Thoth Machshava hunched over clay tablets, elongated skull pulsing with pharmacia-enhanced intellect as his femur stylus scratched furiously. Sobek the Flesh-Eater clacked his massive crocodile jaws repeatedly, spraying blood-flecked saliva onto the railing as he feasted voraciously on platters of forbidden meat and still-warm human blood. The runt's favorite still stands, but he frays at the seams, Sobek roared, his laughter booming across the arena like profane thunder that drowned out even the crowd. The blue flame dog has tasted royal blood and found it sweeter than honey. Watch how flesh fails its own bloodline so exquisitely, so inevitably. Amun-Ra's crystal growths flared brighter, arcs of lightning dancing between them. This Tanaju mortal resists longer than any of the runt's spawn. He carries something the ancient covenants on Hermon did not account for. Perhaps the silent creator stirs at last in the west. Intriguing. Perhaps we shall claim his watcher's gifts when he finally falls. Their collective mockery rolled over the frenzied crowd like a wave. Yet beneath the booming laughter, Leon sensed the first subtle cracks of genuine unease. One obedient man from a distant shore had already toppled 4 kings and survived the cull. The empire built on blood covenants with the fallen Watchers was fraying at the edges, trembling on the brink of collapse. The priest in flowing blood-red robes, his face hidden behind a mask of gold and polished bone, ascended the dais for what felt like the final time. Hidden Mansi workings amplified his voice into a booming judgment that echoed through every corridor, tier, and hidden prayer chamber in the palace. The greater trials have spoken. 2 champions, Prince Thalorion, favored of the depths, and Leon of Tanaju, bearer of the blue flame, now face the culminating phase of the gauntlet before Poseidon the Earth-Shaker, lord of the depths and ruler of Atlantis, enters the fray in his full glory. Let water clash with flame until only the true High King remains. Let the body fail in spectacular fashion for the glory of the Watchers and the eternal insatiable hunger of Rav. The great conch horn, massive as a grown man's torso and polished to a lethal glistening sheen, sounded its deep, mournful blast. The culminating phase ignited without mercy or respite. Prince Thalorion attacked with imperious, wave-crashing command. He raised both massive pincer claws toward the vaulted ceiling, and the island's ancient heart answered like an obedient, ravenous beast awakened. Central canals, hidden aqueducts, and even the deep groundwater reservoirs beneath the palace erupted in a cataclysmic, unrelenting surge. The arena floor vanished almost instantly beneath churning, chest-deep, then rapidly waist-deep, seawater that rose with terrifying speed and force. Pressurized blades of water sliced through the waves like invisible scythes, seeking arteries, joints, eyes, and throats. Massive whirlpools formed and dissipated at Thalorion's whim, dragging debris, fallen bodies, screaming attendants, and even sections of the lower tiers under with crushing, drowning force. Thalorion waded forward through the rising flood like a living tidal wave incarnate, his claws extending into long, lethal spears of chitin and crystal, armor gleaming wetly as he commanded the very lifeblood of the island itself. His aquamantic power was breathtaking in both scope and precision. He could have flooded entire outer rings if fully unleashed without restraint, but the corruption exacted its merciless toll with every invocation. The chitin plates tightened further around his joints and torso, new crustacean growths pushing painfully outward from his spine and shoulders like parasitic tumors, turning his once graceful, commanding movements into something stiff, labored, and increasingly monstrous. Seawater hissed and steamed violently wherever it met, the residual heat radiating from Leon's glowing scars. Leon launched skyward on wings of bright blue flame, the intense heat from his aura turning nearby seawater to hissing clouds of steam and creating a momentary protective halo of mist around his form. From this elevated, hard-won vantage above the maelstrom, the battlefield unfolded in panoramic, nightmarish detail. Thalorion's towering waves crashed against the remnants of earlier petrified formations and vitrified glass, eroding stone and carrying the thick stench of blood, brine, and charred flesh. The favorite son orchestrated the tempest with ruthless tactical precision, directing currents to isolate and overwhelm Leon, while spear-like jets of water lanced upward like the trident of the sea god himself. Leon banked sharply, wings beating with powerful, controlled strokes fueled by both altering strength and desperate faith, and retaliated with focused fury. Condensed projectiles of superheated blue fire lanced downward like spears of heavenly judgment, piercing Thalorion's defensive water shields and striking armor plates with explosive bursts of steam, blinding light, and the sharp crack of fracturing chitin. The favorite son roared in pain and fury, summoning an even larger wave that crashed upward in a wall of death and foam. Leon folded one wing and dove through a narrow gap he had calculated in the chaos, the edge of the wave clipping him painfully and sending him tumbling through scalding spray and debris. He recovered with a desperate glide, cauterizing minor wounds and superficial burns with his own flames, even as new glowing scars formed along his side, then countered with a steep, wing-assisted diving assault. Blue fire-coated fists and Stelios's iron-studded club slammed into Thalorion's shoulder joint with thunderous force. The superheated impact cracked multiple plates and drew a bellow of agony that shook the palace foundations and sent ripples across the flooded arena. The duel between the Lord of Water and the Bearer of Blue Flame escalated rapidly into a cataclysmic, elemental symphony of opposites locked in mortal combat. Thalorion turned the entire arena into a living, wrathful tempest, towering waves converging from every direction at his command, pressurized blades slicing the air and water alike, crushing whirlpools forming and dissipating with deadly intent, corrosive seawater eroding anything it touched for prolonged periods. Leon claimed the upper airs as his hard-won domain, gliding and diving in unpredictable, high-mobility patterns that utilized every ounce of Kion's granted speed and aerial prowess to stay just beyond the worst of the flood, while hurling precise, devastating projectiles that forced Thalorion to divert ever greater portions of his power into shielding and counterattacks. Each exchange deepened the visible, horrifying progression of corruption on both warriors. Thalorion's armor fused ever tighter to his flesh. New crustacean growths erupted from his back and shoulders like aggressive parasites, splitting skin and restricting motion until his once imperial grace became a grotesque, grinding parody. Seawater boiled violently wherever it met Leon's aura or projectiles, filling the vast palace space with thick, scalding mist that burned the lungs of priests, attendants, and spectators in the lower tiers. The crowd's chants grew more delirious and unhinged, spectators leaning so far over the rails in their frenzy that dozens more fell screaming into the flood below, their cries cut short by whirlpools or invisible water blades. Kion's voice grew louder, more seductive, and more insistent in Leon's mind as the prolonged battle tested the limits of his endurance. Feel the raw, limitless power surging through your veins and scars, pup. Thalorion is nothing but a stepping stone already soaked in his father's weakness. Poseidon will fall before you like wheat before the scythe. Claim this island as your eternal dominion. The pain ends the moment you stop resisting me and embrace what you truly are. The glowing scars spread further with every major invocation of power, now reaching fully across his upper arms and beginning to creep onto his torso, blue light leaking visibly like molten sapphire beneath the bronze. Unbidden visions of godhood assaulted him, himself enthroned in the central palace, wings of pure blue fire casting long shadows over submissive rings. The Watchers and Nephilim bending the knee in terror and awe. The endless burning agony of corruption transmuted into exquisite pleasure and limitless authority. For one terrifying, disorienting moment during a brief lull between converging waves, Leon nearly yielded. His flames flared wildly and uncontrollably outward, nearly consuming a group of remnant servants who had rushed forward with aid. Only the olive token's sudden, fierce warmth against his heart, like a living coal of divine presence, and a raw, desperate prayer pulled him back from the abyss. "Not my will," he gasped aloud, wings straining to gain altitude above a massive maelstrom. "Yours be done, creator of heaven and earth. Hold me fast." Thalorion, ever the shrewd tactician, pressed the momentary advantage he sensed. He summoned a true cataclysmic maelstrom centered directly on Leon's airborne position, towering waves converging from every cardinal direction while his pincer claws extended into multiple spear-like projectiles of chitin and crystal that lanced through the water with lethal accuracy. Leon folded his wings tight against his body and dove straight into the heart of the storm, like a comet of judgment, blue flames blazing brighter than the noonday sun. The impact parted the waters in a momentary, spherical void of superheated steam and light, allowing him to close the distance and strike Thalorion's chest plate with a thunderous wing-assisted blow from both club and flaming fists. Chitin cracked audibly across the favorite son's torso with a sound like breaking bedrock. Seawater sprayed outward in steaming geysers as multiple plates buckled and split. Thalorion staggered backward through the flood, armor grinding horribly, new growths splitting skin beneath the damaged sections. But the Nephilim prince was far from defeated. He retaliated with a crushing, wide-sweeping pincer strike that caught Leon's left wing mid-beat. Agony exploded through Leon's body as the wing tore partially, sending him crashing down into the flooded sand with bone-jarring force that drove the breath from his lungs. He rose unsteadily from the churning water, one wing damaged and flickering unevenly, blue flames cauterizing the wound even as fresh, luminous corruption raced through the limb like liquid fire. The crowd's roar reached new, ear-shattering heights, a wall of sound that drowned thought. Egyptian laughter thundered from the luxury boxes above. The dog falters at last. Flesh fails even the most stubborn. Sobek clacked his jaws in delight. Yet still he rises. This one is different. Yet Leon stood defiant amid the flood, club raised high, flames surging with renewed purpose, born not of raw power, but of unyielding obedience. He channeled every ounce of accumulated grief for his team, ironclad faith in the vision, and the collective strength of the remnant's prayers into a sustained, relentless barrage. Blue projectiles hammered Thalorion's defenses without pause, until the favorite son was forced down to one knee in the rising water, armor cracked and leaking seawater like lifeblood from a mortal wound. Thalorion was not slain. The ancient laws of the tournament and his sheer Nephilim resilience allowed him to advance. But Leon stood clearly dominant in this culminating phase of the gauntlet. The palace fell into a momentary, breathless hush as a new, overwhelming presence filled the arena like an oncoming storm made flesh. Trumpets fashioned from massive conch shells and hollowed bones sounded from the heights of the central temple. Poseidon, the Earth-Shaker, lord of the depths and self-proclaimed ruler of Atlantis, descended the grand processional stairs with deliberate, earth-shaking steps. Towering at nearly 16 feet, the Nephilim God-King was a vision of aquamantic horror and primal, unrestrained power. His six-fingered hands, one digit ritually consumed and shared with Thalorion in the forbidden cannibalistic rite, gripped a trident of living crystal and ancient bronze that hummed with dark energy. His body was wreathed in perpetual, churning waves and dozens of floating crystal points summoned by his own altering watcher, Hataza. Each point a deadly projectile or shield, orbiting him like a crown of wrath. His eyes burned with cold, calculating fury at the tournament he himself had declared, now threatening to devour the empire he had built. Seawater and raw elemental power rippled across his colossal form in constant motion. "Enough of these games and cullings," Poseidon boomed, his voice like the crashing of 1,000 waves against cliffs. "My sons and bloodline have torn at each other like starving dogs. Now a mere mortal from distant Tanaju dares challenge the depths themselves. Let the final gauntlet truly begin. Let us see if your blue fire can boil the sea itself." The remaining rounds accelerated into an unrelenting, soul-testing gauntlet of escalating trials designed to break even Nephilim. Leon faced wave after wave of lesser champions and corrupted temple priests summoned as fodder, while Thalorion recovered strength in a side sanctum. Each clash pushed him to the absolute limits of body and spirit. A high biomancy priest raised hordes of undead thralls from the arena's countless dead, shambling, rotting warriors that clawed and bit with unnatural, tireless strength. Leon burned through them in sweeping, wing-generated arcs of blue flame, the heat so intense that bones turned to ash and armor melted mid-charge. A coordinated team of Pharmacia illusionists filled the flooded pit with layer upon layer of phantom kings, false visions of his fallen team begging for mercy or offering power, and nightmarish distortions of the Creator's vision. Leon's faith cut through the deceptions like a blade of pure light. Blue projectiles struck the true forms hidden among the lies, ending the threat in explosions of shattered minds and dissipating powders. His corruption worsened dramatically with every major invocation. The glowing scars now reached fully across his upper arms and torso, beginning to creep onto his neck and jawline. Blue light leaked visibly like molten sapphire beneath his armor, making his silhouette glow even in the mist-filled arena. Strength surged beyond all previous limits, allowing him to shatter stone and outmaneuver faster opponents. But the constant burning pain bordered on debilitating, threatening to overwhelm his senses. Keon's temptations reached their most dangerous peak during a particularly grueling melee against a trio of aeromancy and geomancy hybrids, reinforced by elite palace guards. "Surrender to me fully and completely," the Watcher urged with velvet menace. "The pain ends forever. The throne, the island, the world itself becomes yours to reshape." Leon nearly yielded in a moment of blinding exhaustion and agony, his flames flaring wildly and uncontrollably outward, nearly consuming a group of remnant servants who had rushed forward with healing herbs and messages of prayer. Only the olive token's fierce, anchoring warmth, accompanied by a sudden clear inner peace, and a raw, desperate prayer cried aloud, "Creator, hold me fast, or I am lost," pulled him back from the precipice. The flames receded obediently, leaving him gasping, bloodied, but resolute. Hours upon hours blurred into an unrelenting gauntlet of blood, flame, water, and unyielding will. Leon fought through ambushes in flooded side corridors, desperate aerial duels high above the palace spires, where the air grew thin and cold, and brutal close-quarters clashes in the temple antechambers, where the walls themselves seemed to press in. Thalorion rejoined the fray for a forced, uneasy tag-team defense against a massive wave of elite guards enhanced by forbidden rituals, the two champions fighting back-to-back under duress before the inevitable betrayal renewed their personal duel in a brief but vicious exchange that left both further bloodied, scarred, and pushed to the brink. Leon's damaged wing healed unevenly through raw, altering will, the new tissue glowing brighter and more corrupt than before. His vision occasionally swam with blue light. Whispers of godhood grew harder to silence, but were met each time with prayer and the token's warmth. Throughout the ordeal, the Egyptian giants provided a running, booming chorus of mockery laced with increasing unease. "The dog endures where Nephilim fall," Sobek bellowed between massive bites of flesh. "But how long can mere flesh contain such fire before it consumes its master entirely?" Amun-Ra's crystals sparked with erratic lightning. This one carries something the ancient covenants did not foresee. Perhaps the silent creator stirs at last in the west. Their laughter still thundered, but it carried a sharper, more uncertain edge. As an unnatural, heavy night fell over the island, torches, braziers, and mancy lights transforming the palace into a blazing beacon visible across the dark expanse of the Great Green, Leon stood for a brief, hard-won moment of respite in a side chamber of the central temple. His scarred arms and torso glowed like brands of living judgment. His wings, tattered but slowly reforming through sheer force of will and altering, cast flickering azure shadows on the walls. Poseidon's overwhelming presence loomed just beyond the inner sanctum doors, a pressure like an oncoming cataclysm made flesh. Messages from the faithful remnant continued to filter through veiled servants, prayers ascending unceasingly from hidden circles across the rings, the sea beyond the outermost fortifications stirring with unnatural swelling currents, faint but growing tremors in the deepest foundations of the island. The very ground beneath Atlantis seemed to groan in anticipation. Leon knelt briefly amid the chaos and debris, the olive token clutched reverently in his glowing hands. "The fall begins in earnest," he whispered into the relative quiet. "Let your judgment roll like the waves of the deep. Let one obedient man amid an empire of rebellion and false gods be enough. May your word endure when all flesh withers and fails." The body failed spectacularly all around him, kings petrifying from within, burning away their own life force, mutating into monsters, or drowning in the very power they craved. But Leon endured through obedience. One man against an empire built on sand. The word of the Creator endured. All flesh is grass. The grass withers. But the word of the Creator endures forever. This has been an unabridged audio production of Before the Flood, The Fall of Atlantis, Chapter 15, The Depths Rise, by Matt Matson. All rights reserved by Matt Matson, LLC. Copyright Matt Matson, LLC 2026. If you enjoyed this production, please like, share, and subscribe. Available on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and Spotify. Follow the author at Matt Matson for updates. Links in the description.